Hi everyone, welcome. I'm preparing to slip on a glove so that I could check in on one of my worm bins. It's now, since the last check-in, taken over as the oldest of my systems. And it's right behind me. I'll show it to you in a moment. It's a bin of red wiggler worms, 242 days of age, fed 19 times, and what I've got lined up for feeding 20 today is a pretty generous portion. And the novelty about this system right here, is that it's been fed in a way where we always move the feeding location from one corner to the other, going around and around. So this is the oldest system, which technically should be occupying the far left spot over here on the shelf. These bins are effectively in the status of storing castings. So hopefully by the next time we check in on this bin of worms, we'll see it in its appropriate location, but for now it's sort of displaced. I'm going to put the glove on, we're going to get the system up on the bench, and we're going to get him fed. So let's get started. Did you notice something in that opening clip? Me holding the info board upside down? Well, here you get a straight up look at it without having to turn your neck or flip your phone over. Yeah, 20th feeding going in, although from the perspective of these so-called pocket feedings, these feedings going around the corners, it's still just the 18th of those, 20th of feedings overall. The first couple feedings did not go in pocket style, but that was so long ago at this point. Now, that plastic that was sitting out here has been placed here because I think at this point, with the exception of this system, all my other systems are now covered with plastic. And I guess one of the main benefits of covering in plastic is that the worms actually do cruise around on the top surface and work the materials down that are over here on the surface. But you know, when you're covering only with paper like we've been doing here, the material out here on the surface is kind of dry. Although I did watch a video on another person's channel where they talked about sort of different gradients of moisture, and I wonder if there is perhaps a purpose that the more dry material out on the surface might provide that we'd be robbing them of by not having it here. But whatever, I think it's in the end just better for things to be a little bit more damp than dry in the worm bin. So the plastic covers go on at the end of today's check-in to complement that top covering of newspaper. But I think we're set to begin our inspection of the last feeding, which was positioned underneath this coffee filter, which appears to be kind of holding out. I mean, this bottom side of it has been nibbled clean of the majority of its substance, but the top layer still holds up and is recognizable. So we'll simply reuse it, because right now I don't have another coffee filter to use as a feeding zone indicator. I do have coffee. I got a good bit of it here, and the feeding consists of a nice variety of all kinds of stuff. We'll pick through it and see what's what when we get to feeding, and the feeding will go here. Since we're going clockwise, feeding zone indicator showing where we came 12 days ago to feed. And you know what they got last time? It was like a whole head of cauliflower. And I wondered if it would be the sort of thing that would leave any leftovers after 12 days. Somehow to me it seems like one of those things that the worms really seem to like. Pretty soft and probably easy enough to eat. So I would not be surprised if we found no vegetable matter, perhaps just some leftover bedding. So far I'm seeing nothing. Let's just go ahead and do a little bit of a wholesale opening up of the feeding zone to see what's what. Oh yeah, we got ourselves some worms here, and that was wholesale, all right. Encountering all that leftover bedding reminded me that I had not placed my bedding supply within easy reach so that when we feed we would have it handy. So I just took care of that. But we're not going to open up the spot where we're feeding quite yet. we're going to backtrack through the previous corners that were fed. Not only this last corner that was fed 12 days ago, but the other two corners that were fed even longer ago. In the past, we always found that a lot of worms like to hang out in those corners that haven't even been fed lately, so I'm curious to see what we see over there. Although there's probably no signs of any cauliflower remaining in this pocket or this corner of the bin, I would imagine that this leftover bedding material that went with the last feeding is probably full of all the yummy juices that were emitted from that frozen head of cauliflower as it thawed out and melted down into the feeding zone. So even though the actual kitchen scraps type food is probably long gone at this point, I believe that the bedding that remains in its place is probably something that the worms are really liking. Now, as we work our way back to previously fed corners, I wonder what we're going to encounter. I guess as the system seems to get a little bit drier with these somewhat flimsy coverings, at least on the surface, I worried a little bit about the system just getting dry in general, but luckily even here, the corner that was fed 2 feedings ago seems to be in very nice shape and perhaps not quite as moist as where the head of cauliflower was just broken down, but nice and damp and cozy nonetheless. So this banana stem, these are just the husks of some mango seeds, a couple other things like some corn cob bits. All right, very nice, very nice. We'll just backfill there as well. And before we open up the feeding zone we're going to put food in today, underneath the coffee filter, under the feeding zone indicator, we'll just check this one last corner, which is full of beautiful, freely flowing, nice loose castings. So nice, must say. The system just in general always seems to have such nice, smooth flowing material. Nothing that wants to seem to clump up or get nasty. So I don't know what I did right here, but I wish I could just have all my systems be this way. So I think it is time to proceed to their feeding. Alright, we'll set this aside because we do plan to reuse it. And now we can get down into the corner of the bin that has been fed the longest time ago, whenever that might have been at this point. Very, very nice. Just like everywhere else, the material all seems to just crumble and flow so nice and freely. And now that it's my oldest system, I do feel like I might have to start thinking about what the future holds in terms of how much longer do I want to keep running this system. Do I want to keep running it very, very long, the way my past few systems that I harvested ran, like 300 plus days, 350 or so days? Or do I want to perhaps drive towards harvest sooner and, give the worms an opportunity to move into a fresh home at some point sooner rather than later? That does seem to be like my front runner idea, making me even wonder if, initiating another lap around the bin with continued pocket feedings is really in the cards for this system. I kind of figured since we've had two corner feedings, 2 pocket feedings that were actually quite close to each other in terms of like nearby corners versus these corners that are kind of far from each other. I almost wondered if perhaps after this feeding we would proceed with a deviation from the pocket feeding approach, pretty much abandoning it, and then maybe just starting to transition the system into a setup where the worms are just being kind of, herded over to the edge of the bin where we plan to migrate them from, to haul them out from, which I guess would be this corner if that's the route we opted to take. So I'm not sure yet. I feel like that's sort of an up in the air, yet to be decided thing, but I just figured now, since we just put the second feeding into a, oh wow, half of an apple and a banana peel. You know, now would be a good time, since we've already got a huge number of worms in that corner from the last feeding, and now they're going to be able to sense the food nearby and transition over to working on that stuff for us. And in all that time, whatever continues to happen over there is, you know, conversion of whatever little food scraps and bedding bits might be over on that side. The worms will at the same time keep working all that stuff down, making it all that much finer. And then that might lead to a nice setup for a horizontal migration of the worms out of their space. So I'm going to put a little bit of pulverized eggshell in as grit, and before we cover up the feeding zone, I've also got the coffee. Alright, nice generous feeding. Man, this is such a fun bin. From, you know, mob scenes of worms hanging out to just incredible, beautiful castings material. And I guess there is a certain bit of elegance and whatever, something to be admired when you've got a system that's sort of headache-free, almost trouble-free, you know. And granted, that is the sort of thing you would definitely want to knock on wood after saying, right? So as to not summon some sort of downturn to what's going on in these systems. But I think we're pretty much there. We're ready to cover up, and don't forget, what happens next is a little bit of an upgrade in terms of coverings. It pretty much brings this system in line with all the rest of my systems, giving it plastic covers to enable the system's moisture content to remain in the system rather than being lost to evaporation. And one thing that actually happens as a result of this is that this top covering paper will get damp, and by being damp, it'll be something that the worms will like to hang out on and chew on, so we'll gradually start finally seeing some degradation and breakdown of this top covering newspaper as well. So that's it for the video, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.